Originally, I thought, yes, okay, I'm going to call it Harlow because the New York Post did this thing, and it's in the book. And then I talked to a roommate of mine after I was finished with the book, and I mentioned that I wrote her into the book. There's a funny scene of the two of them, and we were reminiscing about how she was always, she was so authentic and so unapologetically herself. And then she stopped me and she said, Caroline, that's what you have to call it. You have to call it Unapologetic.
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast, where we are reimagining and redefining what it means to be in midlife, where we are gathering energy, momentum, and excitement for our next chapter via candid conversations with other midlifers about their own pivots, pitfalls, and triumphs. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your host, and I'm so happy you're here. Do you think of your parents as full-blown people? Is that a strange question? Okay, bear with me. Here's my theory, that when we're young, we see our parents pretty exclusively through the lens of being our parent. My mom is mom. My dad is dad. They exist only in relationship to me. I think that's just a function of youth, perhaps. I think, though, that as we get older, we start to see them as people who had lives before we existed as their children. And I'm excited for you to meet today's guest, because what she has done is write a memoir about her mother that was part of her grieving process, going through her mother's belongings. She started to process this for herself and started to write it down, which then turned into a memoir, which she has now published in her 40s. And, she has written articles before, but this is her first book. My guest today is Caroline Nadine Helsing, and the name of her book is Unapologetic: Tales of the Original Party Crasher. And what she does in this book is she examines and celebrates her mom's story through the clues and memories that were left behind. And her mom was just this fascinating woman, as she says, equal parts Holly Golightly, Auntie Mame, Mrs. Maisel, and it goes back to a time when her mom was a young woman and was formed as a person. I think that would be an interesting exercise for any of us to go through, is to try to write the life story of our parents as real, fully formed people and not just mom or dad. Anyway, I think you get where I'm going with this. All right. So without further ado, here's Caroline Nadine Helsing. Let's go. Hey, Caroline, thank you so much for being with me.
Oh, it's so fun. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. And I want to give a shout out to Crystal Fox for introducing us. I always like to say how I met people. And I know Crystal through this podcasting community that's kind of come together in Clubhouse. And then she sent you my way. And thank you, Crystal.
Crystal. Yeah, she's great.
So, man, you have a book you've written.
I do.
That's amazing. And I would say it's a brave book.
Yeah.
Because it's so near and dear to you and to your life. I'm gonna let you go back and give us a little bit of your history and what led you into writing your book.
Sure. So originally I'm from Hawaii, Honolulu, Hawaii. And yeah, it was a wonderful place to grow up.
Do you get that a lot, by the way?
Yeah. It's still home to me, there's nothing like it from, any place you've grown up. But I love where I'm living now. I'm living in Newport Beach at the moment. But it was my whole life. I love the concept of your show about, everyone's pivots. And I love pivots. I love change. So if I look back on my life, I feel like I've had so many different lifetimes because I've done so many different things.
You have. We have that in common. I call myself a serial pivoter, and you have certainly been that.
It's exciting, right? And I know you were a photographer, and so I had that background. And I just found out that you have a stage background too. Is that right? Yeah. So that's what brought me to California, because I was doing acting in Honolulu, and commercial work. And, of course you have to see what's out there on the mainland, right? When you're in that industry. So I was doing that for about 8.5 years in LA. And I brought my little Lhasa Apso, my little dog Bentley, with me. And yeah, he was my little buddy. And he used to jump up onto my bed and sleep with me, as little dogs do.
Yeah, I
And
grew up with Shih Tzus, very, very similar to the Lhasa Apsos
yeah,
in the
very
look,
similar.
right? I love them.
Yeah, when people say, what's a Lhasa? I always compare it to a Shih Tzu, but they have more of an underbite. And then my dog had this little snaggle tooth on the side and like a little bust. It was the cute. Oh, and I called him the grumpy old man. He was the best.
He's all, get off my lawn.
Oh, yeah, he hated everyone, but he was great. And so I had gotten in a new bed, a new mattress that was higher than my old one. And so Bentley couldn't get up onto the bed anymore. Poor little guy kept trying to jump up and falling down. So I made a dog step for him to get up onto my bed. Because at the time, I looked everywhere for a ramp or something to assist him, and there was nothing on the market at the time. And I feel like now there's so many options. But when I was looking, there was nothing. So I made a dog step, and then, friends sort of found out, and, they're like, oh, I'd like one. I'd like one. And I've always been entrepreneurial my whole life. So of course, I started making them, and then that evolved into literally a manufacturing company of pet products. I wound up creating T-shirts with slogans that had sayings like "bitches love me." It was a fun tongue in cheek. So we had all of those original sayings. Had about 250 different sayings that you would put on a dog, kind of like what's their personality or what would they say if they could talk. So I had a lot of fun with that, and I hit at a really
Sounds like a lot of fun.
it was, and I loved being creative, and it was. I love animals. I feel like I gravitate toward them more than people half the time. I guess I'm such an animal lover. But, we hit at a good time. It was right around the time when, Paris Hilton and her dog Tinkerbell was everywhere. And it was great. And I had it for about 10.5 years, sold it in 2013. And then I needed to take a break. I needed to take a step back and just kind of breathe again.
Yeah, because that would be no joke. It was a full on manufacturing business, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I knew I had to leave Los Angeles. So I came down to Orange County where our warehouse was. And I had to focus on it 100% for it to succeed. And that's what I did. So I lived and breathed it. And when you have your own business, there's a part of you that's like, oh yeah, I'll have more time because it's my own thing. But no, you live and you breathe and you do it on weekends but still it feeds you, and it doesn't feel like work when you're enjoying it.
Right.
But then it stopped being fun. And so I sold it, and I wound up kind of going back into my first love of photography. And I was doing that. And then I started volunteering, and I connected with the Rotary group, and I would volunteer and go on these mobile medical clinics where we would go into, Mexico or deep into the Amazon jungle. Like that was a trip. That was amazing. Wow. That was one of 4 people to do that. We were one of the last, we were the actually last crew to go into India and administer polio vaccinations via droplets, via the mouth. And I would document that. I would document all the experiences and the people and what we were doing. And then I'd write about it. I'd submit it to the local papers, and that ignited my love of writing. And I've always been a writer. My whole life I would journal. I just kept everything, but I loved to express myself with the written word. It was a lot easier for me sometimes, And so when my mother passed, that's what I did. And in November of that year, in 2019, is when I started to just kind of write down her stories, jot down memories. And, and then I took a memoir class just to kind of get my feet wet and see if this could be a thing. And it became a thing. At first it was just like, a couple stories, and I would tell myself, I don't know, would anybody even want to read this? They don't know my mom. And I didn't care. I wanted to do it for myself. And then if something happened, fantastic. And I'm so glad I did, because people have come to me and said, your book has made me reconnect with my own mother or father or whatever it is. We were straight, now we're talking, or you've inspired me to document. I've always loved, video work. I have someone that's doing like a little documentary of their family. And then I have a girlfriend that just did a little pamphlet about her grandfather, and her grandfather's still alive. And so he gets to enjoy it, and the whole family. And, it's like this. So I kind of feel like anyone can do it. You just ask questions. It was a wonderful way for me to connect with my family who's still around, who's still very much here. I got to know my father, like the man behind my father, which was really nice.
I love that you
very
say
kind.
that, the man behind your father, right? Because it's so interesting how we don't look at our parents as people, right? They're just
Yeah.
we just look at them. I was just talking to somebody else about this the other day, how we tend to look at our parents just purely in the relationship, who they were to us, how they were to us, what are all of our stories that we have collected about them in relation to us as their child.
Right.
And we
Right.
don't think of who they were as a person.
They were once a kid. They were once a, teen. They made mistakes. They're flawed. And it was beautiful for me to kind of go down that path of my mother's life, not only with my own memories of her, through the memories of others. I spoke with her best friend, Marilyn.
Oh my
That was some of
gosh.
the favorite chapters for me to write with her.
It
Yeah.
must have been. Can I just tell you? So,
Yeah.
I for the people listening right now. So, as I'm listening to this story of them and their time in the Catskills in the Borscht Belt, and your mom's best friend calls her because she's got a gig, right?
Yeah.
She's going to sing, right? She calls your mom, and your mom's first thought is, well, of course, the answer is always yes. You said, and her first thought is, what am I going to wear? And are you familiar? Have you watched The Marvelous Miss Maisel?
Marvelous Miss Maisel.
Yes.
That was in my head the whole time I was writing.
Must have been.
Just like that. Yeah. I love that movie.
Oh my gosh. I could, and then I'm picturing, oh my gosh, I was reading the book and then thinking of your mom's apartment filled with the clothes everywhere.
Her
And
whole apartment was a closet. I mean, and I loved that bit when Marilyn had said, yeah, when you walked into her bathroom, she had coats hung on the shower rod. It looked like you were walking into a closet when you went to use the toilet, and she kept her shoes in the oven. I mean, that was how she was even till the end. I mean, I would go into their kitchen and I'd be like, she luckily didn't keep her shoes in the oven anymore, but there would be like shoes in the cupboard, or, she just loved fashion, and she didn't have enough room to store. She was very much a character and very, very much unapologetically herself, which is what inspired the name of the book. And I actually have a funny story with that. Originally, it was going to be called Harlow, because she had been written up in the New York Post for her incredible party crashing skills, and they called her Harlow. So she used, and that's the subtitles of Tales of the Original Party Crasher. And you'll get to that part in the book. She was very good friends with Ron Galella. And he was the original paparazzi, basically. Like, he shot everyone from Brando to Jackie O to, in fact, there's a documentary out about him. It's called Smash His Camera. And it's what Jacqueline Onassis had said to her bodyguard to do to his camera, because he would follow her incessantly. And he actually took that picture, that black and white picture of her walking in New York City with her hair in her face and the black and white striped shirt.
Yeah. I know that shot.
Andy Warhol's favorite photographer. So but when he first started, my mother and he were friends. And he would invite her to all of these movie premieres in the city. And, I call them the Bonnie and Clyde of party crashing, but the only shooting being done was a man with his camera. But, she would like hide his camera under a table and then go off to look for Sinatra. And she had an obnoxious, as you're seeing, an obnoxious amount of confidence. And it was just, so there's lots of stories. And when my mother and father started dating, he would pick her up at these events. She'd introduce him to Ava Gardner, But originally I thought, yes, okay, I'm going to call it Harlow because the New York Post did this thing, and it's in the book. And then I talked to a roommate of mine after I was finished with the book. And, I mentioned that I wrote her into the book. There's a funny scene of the two of them. And we were reminiscing about how she was always, She was so authentic and so unapologetically herself. And then she stopped me and she said, Caroline, that's what you have to call it. You have to call it unapologetic.
It's a great
Yeah,
title. It's a great
that was
title.
yeah.
So I have a question for you. How, so when you think of her as unapologetic, and I haven't read the whole book. I mean, I told you, and I'll just repeat, like that. You sent me chapter 31, which is you going through your mother's things after she passed, and it was so touching. And so I thought, oh, I think I need to read more. So I went and got the first sample chapters that were free on Kindle and took a look at those. And I was like, I think I need a little more. And then so I went ahead and got the book and I'm into it now, but I haven't had time yet to keep going with it. I will, because you got me hooked. You totally got me hooked. What am I asking? I am asking, with that title, Unapologetic, with that description of her, do you feel like you have inherited that sense of confidence as well? Or how did that play out for you guys as
Yeah.
mother and daughter?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so she was always someone that I observed following her bliss, and she never followed a cookie cutter. This is what you're supposed to do when you're this age, or this is what you're supposed to do with female or whatever. I mean, she asked my father out, and she didn't get married until she was 30, 29, 30 years old. I mean, so in that era, she definitely balked the system. She was her own person. It's interesting, everyone's layered, no one's just black and white. There was a part of her that was, I remember she would say to me, she's like, she always had this soft spoken voice. She's like, wow, you can do or girls now can do anything. It's like she said it with like half in awe and half like, just so proud. And so, and she made me feel like I could do anything. And so I attribute that 1,000% to her. And I try not to cry, but like she really did. She gave me the confidence to just literally pursue whatever I kind of wanted to do. And I was and am never afraid of failure, because it's, to me, more scary not to try something. That's way more scary to me, to have like gone through a life and never to have tried something. I'd always been like that, and I laugh at some of the things that I've tried. But I always felt like whatever, if it doesn't work, at least I know I'm loved. Neither of my parents were ever, you need to be this and do this. They were always very supportive. So I'm so grateful for that. It's a long
Yeah.
answer to
Yeah. I
it.
feel very grateful to my parents for that as well.
Yeah.
Like that, it's not every parent that supports a child who wants to go into the theater.
You know this very well. Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
All they said was make sure you get your education.
Right.
And
Right.
I majored in theater. So, for whatever good that degree does you, but you know what it is? I have the BA, I have the piece of paper, and that then made a big difference when I was out needing to get survival jobs as an actor.
I call it my grown-up jobs.
Right. Yeah. And that whole idea of having that kind of support, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think it made a big difference for me as well. Because my dream was always to go into theater, and I always wanted to move to New York, and I got a little waylaid. I got married early, right out of college, and ended up going to Denver for a while, did a lot of theater there, ended up getting divorced because, just realized that we probably should have stayed friends.
Okay.
And I was in my mid-20s by then, and I thought, wow, if I don't go now, I don't want to be 80 and looking back on my life and thinking I never tried.
Right. Right.
And I'm with you. I'd much rather try and fall flat on my face than not.
Yeah, and then it makes you who you are. I mean, with every opportunity, with every experience in life, you grow, you evolve into the person you're meant to be, whatever that means. Because, I feel like, it's very rare for one person to have the same trajectory in their life. And, Like I look at mine and it's all, I mean, I love that. To me, that's the spice of life, the experiencing different things and meeting new people and discovering new things about yourself. I love that.
Yeah. Do you find as you've gotten older that you're more cautious at all? Has that happened to you? I mean, for me in my 40s, I feel like I became much more cautious. And now I'm kind of flipping that on its
Yeah.
head and trying to shake it all up again, you know? As you've gotten older, do you feel like
Oh,
you've gotten more cautious? Like here's a for
no,
instance. I thought that was
no,
going to be your
yeah,
answer.
not at all, not at all. No.
I love that. I
And
love
my,
that.
my mom was like that too. Again, age is really just a number. And I feel like I have a youthful spirit. My mother always had a very youthful spirit. Unless I'm going for a long run, then I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah. But, it truly is like, I feel like if you're doing what you enjoy and you're learning, you're in that state of childlike,
Mm.
wide, wide open. Like, I don't know. It does something to you.
Yes, I'm with you 100%. I 100% think that the key to the fountain of youth is to put yourself in the position of being a beginner. It's that feeling of like, "Ooh, what could happen?" and stepping into something like we did that when we were young. That's what being young was. It's like, "Oh, what might I be?" And you had all these visions and this idea of possibility that
Yes.
went hand in hand with youth. And then
Right.
I feel like we kind of backstep it after some time
Yeah.
and want stability and safety and security.
Whether it's society, like I try not to like buy into what society says, well, this is how you're supposed to feel, or this is what you're supposed to do. And it's so easy to, but I think that plays a part in how people feel too. Don't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I think there's a whole story around aging that says that you should slow down as you get older, that that you should act your age, right? Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. So when you started down this path, so you're putting together your mom's things, you're going through her jewelry, which there was a ton of, right? Giving
Yeah.
it out to friends. At
Mm.
what point did you think there's a story here about my mom that I want to
I just got the chills because I remember when it was. It was. I'll backtrack a little. When she was in hospice and on her last days, and when I was talking with her, I'd promised her that I would take her back to New York City, and she had a love affair with that city like no other. She loved New York. Like I almost feel like New York is like another character in the book, but I said that I would do that, and that's what I did essentially with her ashes. And so it
um,
was the first chapter I actually wrote. I didn't write linearly. I just wrote whatever came to me. I mean, it was such an experience for me to do that. It was more like the act of bringing her back. It was more that versus like for her to stay in that place for all of eternity. It wasn't that. It was like to go back with someone that you love and to see a place through their eyes. It's like a two-way love offering. It sounds really cheesy, but it's like a gift for them, a gift it was a gift for me to do that with her, like
mm,
this journey together. And it was like she kind of came full circle because she started in New York, as you know, that she met my father, you will see. And then, we slowly, I say, migrated west, or they migrated west, and I was born in Hawaii. And then she made her way back to the mainland when I had my company. I brought my family back in. My dad worked with us, my
oh,
brother
wow.
worked with us. And so I kind of got him back into in the mainland. And then when my father retired, they moved out to the desert. And as you'll see, she hated being cold. So there were a lot of funny little excerpts in there. I call them temperature wars. She would have temperature wars with each other. And yeah, I mean, like, she liked to keep it at like a comfy, like comfy air quote, 86 degrees in her house. And my father would, I mean, it's just that my father would never want to open a window because they had a break in one time and he thought the cat would run away. So like all the windows were like sealed shut. And like and when you walk into their house in Palm Springs, it felt like, saran wrap was like wrapped around your
Oh.
head and like you just entered the Sahara Desert and you couldn't breathe. So yeah, but and she liked to she liked to take control of the thermostat even when she came to visit me when I lived in Los Angeles. And so that was like that funny scene that I had with my roommate because she was just like, what's going, so she, my mother would turn it up and then she'd close it, like this would be at night, we'd be in my room. She'd come to visit me for a month. It's another story, but so we'd both be, cuddled in bed and then I'd hear the door open of my roommate's room. She'd like be stomping down the hall, like turning it back down, and then it would be like this rotation of temperatures.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So you went to New York to scatter her ashes. And is that when you thought, oh, I'm here and it's like I'm re-experiencing my mom through being in the same space that she loved so much? And that became the impetus, the little seed of it?
That became the impetus, and then I started talking to my father. My father had taken care of my mother in the last few months, and she was not an easy patient, let's say. And, he he really, really put it all out there for her and just really did an amazing job taking care of her. But I mention this because a couple months after, not even that long after she had passed, he wound up going into the hospital because he had, I think, 6 or 7 ulcers. And I don't even write about this in the book, but he had so many ulcers from, I don't know, stress or
The
not
stress
eating,
of the
not paying attention
situation.
to himself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I'm like, gosh, I find myself back at the hospital now with my father. And I'm like, please don't let me lose him too. But, my father was always very private. And, my mother was the demonstrative one. And they're very yin and yang. And so it was like I was kind of getting to know him, and he would tell me about his life and then about, when he first met my mother and when they first fell in love. Like I was so impressed with his memory. I mean, he remembered, yes, she was wearing a pink knit dress when she came in and, or this song was playing when I realized I was falling in love with her. And I just thought it was so beautiful that he remembered these details. And so, of course, I wanted to, write them down. And I'm very much like a recorder, as even when I was in photography and writing, like
documenting.
document.
Yeah.
So at first it was kind of just for me. And then I didn't even really know how many stories I would have to write about. But it's interesting once you get going, or once I got going, I was like, oh yeah, there's this time. And then there's this time. And then there's, and it just grew into like an almost 400-page book. So yeah.
And then there was editing to do.
Oh, that was fun. Yeah, that took a few months. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Good.
So you ended up talking to did you talk to a lot of her friends? Were they still alive for you to be able to access them and their memories of what happened?
I talked with Marilyn, so her best friend growing up, and that was wonderful. I, spoke with my
Yeah, what a gift, huh?
What a gift.
What a gift.
I mean, it was like she, it through this experience, I got closer with them. And not only that, I got closer with my mother. And talk about, like we were talking about at the very beginning about seeing our parents as just parents and not fully fledged people. Doing this truly made me see, it was like I had a deeper understanding for why she was the way she was. I mean, it just made sense when, her father died at a really young age. They used to live in this beautiful, the coastal section of the Bronx, and then they had to move into more like, were tenement buildings. And so she kind of escaped into this place of movies and entertainment of the era. And that was like her happy place. And she did that her whole life. And that's what just made her so unique, because she was always living, she was a fantasist and she always lived in her own world. And it was like this little glamour world that she just kind of concocted for herself, which was pretty funny when you get to the Hawaii part, because, she stood out like a sore thumb.
Really?
Yeah.
Was that a harder time for her? Or
she always talked about how she she couldn't quite, she made it known that she couldn't quite get her footing there. She was always very wistful for New York. But honestly, when she left, when she moved away, she went to visit more than anyone. I mean, she was always, I came to realize she was wistful for what was. It was part of her charm. And she realized, like, honestly, come on, Hawaii is just, I mean, she called it God's country. And she went back to visit often after she left. But yeah, while we were there, I remember growing up as a kid amongst all the really tall buildings. So we would spend a lot of time in downtown Honolulu, few blocks of that. But, there she's going to see men in, suits and, because they're there for work. And then we would just kind of hang out in the coffee shops and my brother and I would have our coloring books or our books and we would keep ourselves busy. And she loved Hollywood biographies. That was her thing. She was always reading. She was a voracious reader. And honestly, she probably could have become a Hollywood historian for all that she knew about everyone. And she knew a lot of them too. So she just loved these stories and she would always be reading and we would be doing, our own thing. And then we would spend time in Waikiki and there was, always something exciting going on in Waikiki. And I remember she would take us to, I think it was at the Royal Hawaiian, there was they called them tea dances. And so it was all like the big band music, like Duke Ellington. And, I think it was my first time I discovered jazz. And so my brother and I guess she befriended the band leader. My brother and I would get on stage before it started with this on-air sign. And then we'd hop down and giggle and dance with my mom to the music. And I mean, that was like our childhood. Like we were always with her. We were always, I mean, obviously I had my friends too, but like I remember spending a lot of time with her and a lot of time, like even with her friends. And I think that's why, like, even to this day, like I love older people. I am very comfortable. Like I love conversation. I love, that to me is, I probably spent more time with her and her girlfriends or just listening to them talking or I don't know, that was my norm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Sounds like quite a lady. Oh my goodness.
She was.
So cool. I can tell that this was, or at least it looks to me like this was a very healing process for you.
Yeah, it's very therapeutic, very healing. And it made me feel like she was still with me the whole time. I mean, it still feels like she's with me. And it's funny, my book was finished, I called my father and I had said, okay, the book is done. And he's like, well, that's it's wonderful, sweetheart. And, but I shared I was scared. And he said, what do you mean? Why are you scared? And I said, well, first, I'm scared. I'm scared of what you're going to think. And because he's very private and he literally gave me the permission to release it. Really. I mean, it's not so many words like he wouldn't have stopped me, but like, I wanted to make sure that he was okay with everything. And he said, Caroline, these are your memories of your mother. And I guess I'm private, but I'll just have to take that into consideration when reading it. So it was really nice because in order to tell my mother's story fully, I needed to tell a little bit my father, and a little bit of my brother. And, they're in their.
Yeah, and that's tricky. That's really tricky.
Yeah. And I wanted to say it, I wanted to tell the story as authentically as I could, but with love. And I think I did. So that's my intention. But yeah, I was going to say, I was worried that I was going to feel like I would have lost her all over again when I was finished writing the book. And that was like a fear of mine. And I will tell you that I'm talking about her more now. So it's not the case at all.
Wow. It's interesting because I had interviewed some time back. I interviewed a friend named Charlene Lamb, and when her mom passed, she was an only child, and so she was tasked with clearing out her mom's house. And her mom had just gotten her dream house, and there was a lot of stuff, a lot of things, and she had to, go through it all by herself and figure out what to keep and what to get rid of. And she's one of the things that she does is she curates art shows. And so she thought to herself, well, if I were curating a show and I could only keep 100 things that really spoke to who my mom was, what would those be? And that has since launched her onto a whole new career path. And she's looking at doing grief coaching.
Mhm.
And she's since curated several art projects from other artists to say, can you do a drawing of her mom had a purse collection. So there's these watercolors of her mom's purses or at least one of her mom's purses and a few different things, and she's teaching other people how to do that. And it's a very similar process to what you've done, is honoring this person through the things that you identify as being part of who they were.
Yeah. 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 And it's interesting too, not everybody feels the need to hold on to things. My father is not that way. He's kept very few things, just a few things, and that's all he needs, and for me, I'm almost the other, I'm like, I got a license plate, their license plate that said blonde. I know I've got all the, but I'm so grateful that I did that, because those things spurred, I'll come across something. In fact, photographs are huge. And, on my socials, I try and put a photograph or a video or something, I try and do something daily of my mother, the two of us together. And she had a lot of images, and at first I was like, oh gosh, I'm gonna renounce you. And then I forgot that I had put a bunch away in this hope chest. It was like another unearthing of this gift that she gave me. And, and then I was like, oh yeah, it's right. Her yearbook's in here, and her, and so it was so nice to get those because it for me, it gave me to have those details to write into the book also,
Yeah, because things can trigger those memories. Like, it's amazing the power of objects, right?
Right.
Yeah. Wow. What have you learned about yourself through this process?
I say by learning about her, I've learned so much about myself. Well, I will say that there are parts about me that I'm like, oh, that my mother would have said that, so I learned that. You always think you're completely different, but there's some similarities, I guess. I learned just how much I knew I loved her, but just how much I loved her, and the things that drove me crazy are the things that I'm celebrating,
It's funny how that happens, right?
Yeah.
I think that is a very common phenomena.
Yeah. She would always talk about I know when, you saw this person you would hang out with. All right, my heard of it, and now I'm just like, and this, and it's just, it's interesting how that happens. But, learning a lot about my father too, and how, so I'll back up. He was married, and you'll get to this. He was actually married, and I don't want to tell you too much because I want it to be a surprise. Okay.
Right.
So
Right.
Too much.
It's a fine line, right?
He was married before. Okay. But the way they were still very much respectful of each other, and there was still that love there, enabled my father and, myself and his children, to all still have a relationship. So I'm so grateful for that, because, he's now in Washington. It's like he kind of came full circle. He had, 7 children, and 2 passed away at birth. But so five children. I had 5 half brothers and sisters, and then myself and my brother. So he's got 7 children. So a lot. There's a few that live in Washington, and then, there's a grandchild, and so there's a lot of family. And so now he's surrounded by a lot of family, and I'm so grateful for that, because he's, in his 90s, and in Palm Springs, it would have just been him and my brother, and, and he wasn't doing that great, not having my mom there, but he's doing okay now. So I'm grateful for that.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. It sounds to me like you learned how important your family is to you.
Yeah, I learned just how important. Yeah. And how also I used to think that my family was a very small, unit, just my mom and dad, my brother and I, growing up in Hawaii, it was just the 4 of us. So our holidays during Thanksgiving or Christmas, it was just the four of us. But I realized, wait, no, I have this extended family, these like, half brothers and sisters, and we're getting to know each other more. And so that's really nice. Um,
Wow.
really liking it. Yeah.
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 That's really cool. What do you wish you had known when you started down this project path?
What do I wish about writing
Yeah, anything.
or
Like what do
um,
you like, how you kind of you step into something and there's maybe some points along the way where you're like,
yeah.
what was I
Okay.
thinking?
Yeah.
Was there anything like that for you or
Yes, that came to me during the editing process. So
Mm.
I did it all myself, including the formatting of the book. And, so I'm learning as I go. And the book was actually finished in December, but by the time it published, it was March. And that was all editing and reformatting and like, no, I want the column here. And, how do I get this to do it work? And then, so to answer your question, when I was done with everything, then I discovered, oh, wait, there's programs out there where you literally just upload it and press a button and then it does it all for you. And picks the font and the size. And okay, that's
Oh, really?
I wish I knew that. I
I
would have
bet
saved
you
people a
wish you
lot
knew that. Oh my
here.
goodness, right? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I'd be banging my head against the wall on that one
Yeah.
probably.
But I know it for the next one if I do another one.
Yeah. Well, what do you think is next for you? I mean, you're going to have some time where you're going to be promoting your book, right?
Yeah.
And then I imagine that's going to wane at
Yeah.
some
So, well,
point.
I'm very busy promoting it now. And I actually just finished the audio version of the book because I had a lot of requests for that. But I'm in the process of doing edits on that. So that'll be fun and exciting. And that's another thing where I just jumped right in head first without any sort of, knowledge, but just learning along the way. Then I discovered that recording in a walk-in closet is really good acoustics. So that's
Yes.
what I recorded it in my, amongst the coats and everything. And it sounds pretty good. So yeah, so I'm kind of working on wrapping that up, but I want to have music in there. And, honestly, it's just an artistic thing. It's like, I would do this regardless, it's just another form of telling her story. And so I'm doing that. And then I actually gotten some interest in this turning this into a film. So
I was gonna say,
I'm just
especially when I had that whole vision of Mrs. Maisel, I was like, oh my gosh, I could kind of just what little I've read so far, I can see
yeah.
very easily becoming something that would work well on film.
So that's exciting. And so
That's
yeah,
exciting, yeah.
you
Wow, 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 wow. Just diving into it all full on. I love how you've taken charge of doing this and making it happen.
yeah.
Kudos.
Thank you.
Because that requires a lot. That requires a lot of energy.
Yes, it does.
It
Yeah.
requires a lot of imagine yes, faith. And when you get in the middle of something, it can get, you can get a little lost in the woods. And you push through that to get the book out.
Mhm.
So cool. So cool. Good for you. Good for you, man. Oh, man. So, where do people find the book? How can people get
So,
a hold of this? Because I highly recommend it, first of all.
oh, thank
Just
you.
from what I've read so far, I'm like, okay, I'm ready for more. Bring it.
Uh, so they could find it on Amazon. So it's available in Kindle and paperback on Amazon. There's also a large print version, which I thought I'd do because, I don't know, for people who need a little bit help with their eyeballs or that, the different age group. But so I
Mhm.
have those versions now. And then you can find me. I have my website. It's Caroline Nadine Helsing.com. And that kind of links all my socials together, but it's quite easy to find me on social. It's the same handle, Caroline Nadine Helsing author, except Twitter is Miss Helsing 007.
Oh, 007. I like. Fantastic. And I will have all that information in the show notes for people to come and find you as well. And thank you so much for telling me your story.
Welcome. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. I have to tell you that since I interviewed Caroline some time back, I did finish her book, and it was very touching and kept me reading. Her mom was definitely a fascinating woman. So it's a highly recommended read. Go get it. If you want to check that out, I'll have links in the show notes for you guys. Wouldn't it be an interesting exercise to try to write the story of your mom or your dad to get a better understanding of who they are or were and why? And I wonder how that might affect your relationship with your mom or your dad, to do that. Just really interesting. What I really love is Caroline's very clear love and admiration for her mother. Yeah, really touching. So there you have it, guys. I'm so glad and thankful for you to be on this journey with me listening. Really appreciate it. If you ever want to get in touch with questions or anything at all, please feel free to do that. Send me an email to latebloomerliving@gmail.com. And I do hope you have a very good week. Stay safe and well. Talk soon.